Hello, everybody. This is Kops Office Hours. Today is Friday, August 14th. I'm your moderator, facilitator, John Myers. I work for Proofpoint. A reminder, this meeting is being recorded and will be put on the internet. Please be mindful of the code of conduct, which is basically to be a good person. I've put a link to the agenda in the Zoom chat. Please feel free to put your name to the attendees list and add any items you'd like to discuss to the agenda in the appropriate place. So, okay, action items from last time. We have none listed. Are there any action items that people have from last week? We'll move on to open discussion. Cyprian, talking about Docker Hub.
So big news yesterday, Docker Hub is changing their terms and conditions again. It's a little blurry at this time what exactly they will be doing because it's a mess split into email, terms and conditions, and pricing. So from what I see, the biggest issue is the number of pools per image. Not sure exactly if it will be per user or per image or somehow what they will decide in the end. But we should actually try moving from Docker Hub, or I don't know, find some way to deal with this before November 1st. And take into consideration that all the releases are fixed on that repo.
Yes, as far as I know, it's only one organization, the Copio organization, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So I am planning on paying for it or getting the CNCF to pay for it. I am also planning on not paying for it in perpetuity, and therefore switching to, we should get onto the kates.gcr.io, which is coming very, very soon. And so we should do that, but I don't see any way we can avoid paying for it. And I don't think it's unreasonable to pay the $5 a month they're asking for anyway. I don't know if anyone has yet seen this already. Some people were saying that there was already rate limiting. And as I understand it, it would be per IP. So if you launched a big cluster with a NAT gateway, or in other words, with private IPs, without public IPs, you might notice, or you would likely notice this if it was big enough.
Yeah, I think they'd already implemented it at a far higher level, is my understanding, and that it's enforced on the clients rather than the repos, I believe. But yeah, the messaging has been pretty atrocious, I think, in terms of clarity.
I think they're still trying things to see what it works for them.
Yeah, which is reasonable, but yeah, I think the communication could have been clearer.
Okay, Peter, Peter, ETE jobs.
Yeah, the ETE jobs were failing for GCE because of bucket permissions. Justin suggested a fix, and I'm pulling it up now, and it looks like I implemented the fix. It's still failing. I haven't had a chance to look into it since.
I can explain what's going on, and I would propose that we talk about what we want it to do. I could explain what's happening and why it's happening and provide a couple ideas. So what's going on is the nodes that are the VMs that are running all the stuff, all the Kubernetes stuff, are authenticating to that bucket as the node service account. So in GCE, each node has a service account. And what we're doing is we're assigning, like, if you don't choose a service account, if you don't specify a service account, it's going to give you the default service account, default compute service account associated with that project. So every project in Google has a different, it's going to have a different service account. If you do specify that service account ahead of time, then we could add permissions like that. Then we could grant that service account access to a certain bucket, and then we could run all of our nodes with this service account. That was the thing that I started working on a few months ago, but before coronavirus hit and I got tied up. But that's basically like the long and the short of it. It's just based on the fact that we're using a different project every time. A different project in the project generator thing that Prow uses.
It's also tricky because GCE doesn't have, or GCS, I should say, doesn't have the same permissions model as S3 has in terms of subtrees. I think it's starting to come in, but it's still a little complicated. I think I looked at it and like filed some internal bugs because I found it very difficult to understand and very difficult to make actually like do what I expected it to do. So I will see where those bugs got to. But without using those, what we should be able to achieve is granting access to the whole bucket. So we like if you have multiple clusters in a bucket, we don't get the granularity or the isolation that we get on an S3 bucket. But that should work, and so I'm interested to find out why it's not working.
Yeah, so what I would suggest is that we have a bucket, and then we just generate, we create a path that has some random thing at the end of it, and then we just clean up after ourselves at the end of it, and then just create a service account, and then make sure that that service account has full access to that storage object admin on that bucket, and then we should be good to go. We should solve this problem once and for all. That the problem is getting that service account, and I found that very difficult to do. Maybe that's become a little bit easier now. I can tell you exactly. I can help. I have everything documented. I went through this a couple months ago, and I'm happy to share my notes and get this thing done because it's driving me crazy too.
Oh, great.
Okay, Cyprian, Docker faults. You have the next item.
You're muted, Cyprian.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
You're still muted. Oh, there you go.
Okay, thank you. So in the past, Docker was started for Kubernetes without the IP tables rules. This is a historic thing that I cannot find any reference at the moment. We tried to implement that in kops also, but due to the way it was started, first via the package manager installation, it already got to the point where it added the firewall rules. So our settings did not have any effect when we restarted it with our preferred config. Some people were starting to use it as it was, so using Docker to do various things that needed internet access. And they complained when they got to 1.18 because, well, we don't have package manager to install it anymore. So it actually didn't create the rules. So I think my question would be, do we want to keep doing this? I really don't know why it was done in the beginnings. And two, what do we do about it? Do we want to document something in the Docker configs that if you want Docker commands, you have to enable the IP rules, or I don't know. So any feedback?
A question, does IP tables, you posted a workaround, which seems like a good thing we could put in like as a release note. And I think that workaround was to essentially set these two options back to true in the Kubernetes, in the cluster config for kops. Does that break IP tables?
No, it doesn't. Pretty much every CNI or every component figured out how to work with the Docker rules because probably too many people didn't know about this thing. It's just the question of how do you want to handle it? Add a release note, add a documentation note, or make it, let's say, probably less secure by enabling by default, using the Docker defaults, let's say.
I'd be in favor of the release note and taking the more secure option.
Okay, sounds
Yeah.
fine.
I double checked, and GKE is still setting these options to false, both to false. I don't know if there's any reason why we're still doing that there, but as far as I know, like basically everyone sets them. But yes, you're right. It could just be like everyone has carried forward these settings for all time. But
More
I like
secure, considering that no one can run some Docker containers that do various things from if they get access to Docker somehow. But that's about it. Kubernetes doesn't care about it anymore.
I mean, I presume if they get access to Docker, they could run a privileged pod anyway, and they can run a privileged.
And they can talk locally anyway. So.
They can run like a privileged container anyway if they get access to Docker. Yeah. But yeah, it's another roadblock, I guess. I can try to find out why we set these. I seem to recall it being important to set originally. I don't know whether it's still important.
I think originally they clashed with the CNI firewall rules or even with kubeproxy. But in the recent days, like last 2 years, everybody fixed their CNIs to play nice. Anyway, for now, it's not that important. We had only 2 people complaining about it. So I guess most people don't run Docker commands on their hosts. Okay, I will add a release note and see how things go from there. Thank you.
Etsy manager recovery. It's also you.
Okay, so in the last few weeks, I had some trouble with etcd in general. And at some point, I had to remove a node completely and was hoping that recreating it, including the storage, would bring back the data, like replicate from the 2 others that were healthy. Surprise, didn't happen. So I had to pretty much reset the etcd cluster and restore from backup in the end. But I think that this should work as a behavior. And later, I think Moshe has a use case for this, which is more than recovery.
Yeah, mine's a little bit different. For me, it's mostly just like modifying the volume. It's something that I was able to do, like to trick kops into thinking it can do it by editing the cluster spec manually directly on the S3 bucket, and then modifying the volume on AWS. So I didn't have to recreate anything. It's just changing the volume type on AWS, for example, from GP2 to IO1, and then increasing some IOPS provisioning. And then I just had to go to the cluster spec, modify these fields directly on S3. And as soon as I uploaded back to S3, kops update cluster was happy about everything. So I was just curious about why it's not supported.
Yeah, so for the reason of why it's not supported, I suspect it's just that no one has, it probably used to be unsupported. Like it probably used to not be supported. I don't know if it used to be possible to change the type on like hot, as it were. And if it is now possible, I'm guessing it's just that we have never updated the logic to allow that. So it would be great to get that to be allowed, particularly if you didn't have to do anything special other than like bypass the validation logic.
Yeah, that's pretty much what I had to do. I was just more concerned because yesterday I did that in a test cluster, so I wasn't too scared of breaking it, but I was mostly concerned if there are any unknown consequences or implications of me doing so, like behind the scenes, and if there's anything unexpected we should expect.
If EBS lets you do it live, it shouldn't, then it's just whatever consequences there are of doing it live on EBS. Like, we shouldn't care, but I don't know if there are, I don't know if people here know of surprises.
Yeah, the validation being out of date is kind of a different issue. I think Cyprian's issue is more of if you lose the data.
Yeah, I agree that we should get.
Can that CD, reconstruct that node?
Yeah, etcd
Sorry, did I understand correctly that we got into this state just by deleting one of the masters?
Not deleting the masters, but deleting also the volumes for etcd.
Oh, okay. Thank
One
you.
volume or all three?
Two. It's two, not three. Three just if you use Cilium.
Wait, you deleted 2 out of 3? 2 out of the 3 etcd volumes, or?
No, I'm talking within the cluster. You have a cluster of 3 nodes.
So one of the node and its volumes.
Yeah.
Everything included. Yeah. It was in a bad availability zone and had to move it.
Okay, let's, okay, I didn't know. Okay, that sounds like another story, but we'll not get distracted again. Would you mind opening an issue on etcd manager, describing sort of how to reproduce, and I will look at what happened.
No problem.
It might be you have to issue a command because we consider it to be an unsafe operation. I don't know that it would be an unsafe operation, so it might be so you should probably, but please do open an issue and I will look at exactly what the state we got into.
Thank you.
Because this should be the same as like expanding clusters as well, so I don't know.
Well, it should be the same as dropping the node and re-adding it. It might not know to drop it.
It's a good thing to fix, and it may be useful in other scenarios as well.
Well, many people, when they start doing testing with kops, they want to see how the recovery works, disaster recovery. They don't care about the storage being on EBS. They delete everything and expect to work. And then they come back and say, hey, this didn't work. Why? What happens if I break it? So
yes, it's a great thing to do. And I think I agree with them that like they should be able to delete all their instances. If they delete all their volumes, well, I mean, we guess we have the S3 backups as well. So yes, yes, we should make sure that we don't get into a surprising case when it is easy to recover. If it's the case, the unsafe operation thing is, for example, if they did delete all their volumes, it should still be possible to recover from S3. The challenge is because you lose something, we don't want to do it totally live. So we will require a command.
I also got into another issue that's low priority, that it didn't find the right backup. So it was surprising that I had to correct it manually. When it tried to, at some point it tried to recover automatically after I deleted everything, let's say. And it tried to recover from a backup that didn't exist anymore, was deleted. So have no idea, it was a painful day, so it didn't look that much into it.
Sorry about that. Yeah, if you want to file 2 issues, I will look at both of them. That'd be great.
Okay, I will do it. Thank you.
But I understand like one of them might be harder to reproduce.
Okay, Peter, client certificate authentication and ACM certificates.
So our cluster spec allows users to provide an ACM certificate that gets attached to the API ELB, and that changes the listener from TCP to TLS. And when that happens, client certificate authentication no longer works because the TLS session is established between the client and load balancer rather than the client to API server. So client cert auth doesn't work. And so what has been happening unknowingly is if you're using a kubeconfig file generated from kops export kubeconfig, it ends up falling back to using basic auth. And so upgrading to kops 118 and Kubernetes 118, where we disable basic auth by default, that causes issues during the upgrade. And we needed to explicitly re-enable basic auth. But since it's being removed in 119, it's better to come up with a better solution for this. And so I opened a PR for one of my ideas, which is kops creates an A record that is api.internal. The cluster name, and that A record contains the master IPs. And so we could use a kubeconfig file that points to that record instead of the EOB's DNS. And so kube control, or whatever the client is, would connect directly to the masters, bypassing the load balancer, and then client cert auth would still work. We would need to open up security group access from the instances to whatever was allowed to reach the EOB. But that's kind of one of my ideas. I haven't had a chance to test it. My main concerns are dealing with DNS TTLs, because we primarily use the kops export kubeconfig during like upgrades and rolling updates, where the DNS records might be changing. And so if we're now relying on TTLs rather than load balancers adding and removing instances, that might cause additional issues. So I don't know if anyone has any other ideas or feedback on that.
I think the general approach sounds reasonable to change this based on using an ACM or configuring an ACM certificate in the cluster spec. I think that a site that uses this would behoove them to not use client certs and install some sort of other authentication provider sooner. I think opening the security group in that case is probably reasonable.
Yeah, that was going to be my question. Is so, first of all, like the basic old thing is sort of working as intended, right? Like that's why we did this way. To uncover these issues, what's left? Like they will have to install like the AWS IAM Authenticator or OIDC and run things that way.
Well, if they want to use certificate auth, which is probably when they first create the cluster, they're going to have to talk to the internal API and bypass.
Yeah, but I mean, like then we have this other API endpoint, which how do you talk to it, and what's the point of that other API endpoint, right? The one which you
that
put
one,
this...
that one you're going to need IAM Authenticator or an OIDC provider or something else. You have to use something other than cert auth.
So I had two ideas. One is two alternatives. One is we kind of just discourage the use of the ACM certificate. There's not really that much benefit to using it. The reason we adopted it was because it's, we don't have to keep the cluster CA in everyone's kubeconfigs. It's one less field to manage, and but like we can easily just go back to using that and switch back to TCP listener. My other idea was we open an additional port on the ELBs that does not have the cert that points to the same masters. And so then this additional port, when we want to use client cert auth, you would hit this additional port instead of the 443 port. I think that could be more confusing to users, but.
Yeah, well, I mean, I presume the reason you would want to use the ACM cert is you do have a different authentication provider and you don't, so therefore you don't want to distribute the CA's root. So you would do that for like the ordinary users, but the break glass or cluster initialization where you need to use a client cert, yeah, you need a different path.
There's also SSH tunnels. We have not used that anywhere, so I'm a bit reluctant, but like that is another path. We don't rely on them anywhere to date.
But I think the having the internal API is a reasonable path. You are going to be limited by DNS, but that I think you only really need to use that up until the point where you install your other authentication provider.
And I personally test that a lot. I tend to actually run, if you use a domain name and you are not using a CNI, you get DNS load balancing unless someone's changed it behind my back. And so like I actually do that. And like that's, like I had this, that was the bug with the replacing or wrapping the client Go. Like that one we did see, but in general, until that happened, it was fine. So it's not bad, and it generally, it used to work fine. They introduced something which broke it a little bit, and it's fixable. The DNS, relying on DNS. I do worry about exposing the internal load balancer publicly. Like we wouldn't be able to lock it down, right?
But I still don't see that you can do much with that you can't do by going through the ELB. So you can hit the same port going through the ELB. So if you don't open any wider than you open up the ELB, it's not that much of an issue.
Yes, it might need to be doesn't the internal use the internal IP addresses? Like the 10 dot IP addresses typically?
Yeah, I mean, you'd have to be able to talk to those.
Oh, okay, I see. All right, maybe we should discuss more on the issue. Like, I think we've identified a bunch of ones. Like, I'm feeling like SSH isn't actually terrible, even though like in general it's terrible. I'm like, it might not be the worst option of the ones. But yeah, I'm not wild on what I consider to be personally the best of those options.
Okay, I didn't open an issue for this, so I will do that, and we can discuss more there.
Okay.
Just for completeness, the other option is to somehow use the authenticator, but like, you know, as this is the break glass option, that feels problematic as well.
Yes.
Okay, so I have a PR open which makes a significant change to worker node bootstrap. So to get the kubelet cert, instead of fishing it out of the bucket or using the node authorizer, NodeUp will make a request to kops controller authenticating with a cloud provider specific authentication in AWS that's using a signed get identity request, similar to the way Vault works. And then it provides private keys, and then the kops controller will sign those and issue certificates for kubelet. It also enables the node authorizer so that those individual kubelet certs will work. So I've coded this so that it uses this mode for AWS starting in Kubernetes 1.19 forward, and effectively means you can't use those other two older methods with Kubernetes 1.19 plus in the new in AWS. So I wanted to, yeah.
Just on that last point, you can't. Is there a technical reason why we can't use it, or is it just that there's no flag?
There's no flag. I mean, we possibly could, but
I just want to like, yeah. So it is. Yeah. That's why I was like, yeah.
Yeah, that's part of why I wanted to bring it up here, is to validate that choice.
I've looked at this PR as well. I think I've looked at this PR. John and I've gone back and forth a lot. I'm pretty happy with it. But yes, it's the open to the floor, I guess.
Crickets. Okay.
I love it, John. I would love to help you test.
Okay. The other is, once this goes in, I would strongly encourage other cloud providers to implement their own authenticators on top of this. I gave an interface, and it'd be great if we could get this more secure mechanism in place for other cloud providers.
Sounds good. I'll take a read through this.
And I think one of the things that John and I had very brief, we didn't go back and forth many times, did we? Just like 30 or 40, I think. Had a very brief like back and forth about was whether this like the interface would work for other cloud providers. So we should try to do that and figure out whether we want to we can always add a different method for a different cloud provider, which is going to be fine. But like if we could figure that out earlier, it would be better.
Yep.
Okay. Cyprian, ARM64.
Okay, so I pushed it a little further, built images, all the kops images with ARM64. Yeah. Did a trick for the generic without dash ARM64 or AMD64 to push the AMD64 one to it for now. So to be compatible until we decide on how to build the manifest. And other than this, should work except at CD Manager that it's different repo. So we'd have to handle it there. But I see no issues with that. So me and Ole already tested it, well, small clusters, and works pretty well. So the question was, should I go ahead and merge it like this and figure out the manifest later? So in the next few weeks, I guess there won't be any major roadblocks with that. Or do you have a different preference, or should wait for something else?
I was just going to say, I thought the idea of pushing it was very, very clever. Like that's genius. I like that. Like pushing it to the no suffix name, because like presumably if you're going to use ARM, you're going to expect you can like use the suffix, and if you're going to use AMD64, then you might not be using the suffix. So I like that approach a lot.
Yeah, it should work right now to not break anything, but so it works perfectly with side loading right now. It won't really work if someone provisions like you would do with kops regularly, expect to pull it from the bucket, because some of our components come up with, let's say, daemon set deployments, and I could do something there to create, to put two daemon sets with node selectors or something, the way Flannel did it. But I think it's a greater chance that in the next few weeks we'll figure out how to deal with the manifest. So there's no reason for such extreme workarounds.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. I think I've heard reference to a Go tool which people use for the manifest. I think that is the tool called Scopio, which as someone that registered the domain name Copio, you can imagine how I feel about this tool. But nonetheless, we should probably use it if it does it. I've seen like this used in the Kubernetes repo. So I think this is the one, but I haven't actually got past my rage to figure out whether it actually is the one. But
I saw some references to manifest tool, which is created by, it's in Go, and is created by one of the Docker guys, Containerd. Let me.
Cool. I like that name a lot better. So.
Yeah. So he's doing a lot of nice work. So I think we can use it, that one or Docker, but that one seems standalone and doesn't require the Docker, I don't know, daemon and whatever else it needs just to push a manifest.
Yeah, the problem, if I recall correctly, was that you had to push the per arch images in order to create the other image, which, or at least have them, it seemed like it was pretty heavy in that regard. So I don't know.
It still doesn't matter because we have to push everything at the same time. So it's just not nice, but in the end, you end up with the same thing.
Well, I think this stuff is good to take now. We'll want to do a release soon after, so we can clean up some of the interim stuff, and yeah, then we can worry about multi-arch.
Yeah, anyway, we need a new release so that I can re-enable some of the tests because the artifacts change name for the image, unfortunately.
This could be the release where you propose a PR. I think, did we merge? I think we merged this. If this is a 119 release, we are on the new devolved process, more devolved process, whereby you can propose a PR to tag an alpha, and then I will do the remaining mechanics.
Oh, interesting, yeah.
Definitely worth a try.
What could go wrong?
Well, I mean, it'll be tested and stuff. So it will be yes, yes. We have to try it one time. I'd rather try it on Alpha 3 than on 119.0.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go to the next one because I think we're pretty late.
Yeah. Okay, so since I had already enabled authorization mode webhook for 119 plus, the other question is, do we want to enable kubelet authentication token webhook mode by default so that tokens provided to kubelet would then be go to token review instead of being rejected outright? So I don't see any security downside. It's just enabling a feature that a lot of people are going to want to enable. Just better defaults. So okay.
It's good. It is a slightly bigger surface, but it's used elsewhere, and so it has use cases. So
okay, better defaults. So then I have a PR to for kops controller to take the node labels from the cloud tags instead of out of the clusters and instance group specs. I believe we agreed to move forward in the last meeting. I just need somebody to review it so it gets merged. So and then Anderso.
Yes. Currently there was some traction on the Windows Worker support issue. We or my company, we have made a set of scripts to run Windows Workers with kops, but it's a bit hacky and sidelined. But there seemed to be maybe some interest in trying to move kops forward in that direction. So I was just wondering about how do we proceed. I saw there was a few items listed that could be started with, like file path, making sure that it works on Windows and Linux. There's some CNI stuff that needs to be discussed or figured out, since Windows requires different settings for Flannel. So just wondering what the feeling about moving forward with such work would be.
If you have an interest in it and the capacity to do it, then we'd love it. Jump in there. Absolutely. Especially if there's issues open on it. Happy to have contributions.
So the thing is that it would be pretty different from what we have now, or we would have to rewrite parts of Node app.
Yeah.
So I'm not against it. We already talked about it a few times in Slack. Just that it may require an effort to move it like to 120 or 121 because it will be a big change. So you have to be prepared to either have a separate branch and start testing things. We can help you and guide you, but depends a lot on you, because I don't know, at least me, I don't have any access to Windows machines for now.
Yeah. Yeah. So for our part, we have a, well, not significant, but we have workloads that require Windows. So for us, we need to run Windows nodes.
I'd be saying that we maybe many of us don't have access to even run it. So we can guide you, we can help you make it work, but maybe we can't even test it in some cases, or we will be doing it just in automated tests.
Yeah. But that's also, I guess, a thing at some point then with, the automated test infrastructure to be able to safely move forward with such a project as well. Making sure that everything works and new features that will affect Node up on both sides then. And yeah, I mean, it'll add more things. And I remember one of the last times I talked to some of you about this, it was set to wait until the K8s admin or the cluster management tool, because that should handle Windows or something. But I'm not sure how the status of that is either. So
I really like that you have the scripts. Like, this is, like, just reading through this is super helpful. I feel like we should establish like a realistic goal. Like, we shouldn't, as I understand it, like running like API server and all those pieces is a lot harder, and we should be like just Windows nodes, not but Linux masters, presumably like only looks like you're using flannel, so like only flannel or something. And then we could, but I would be in favor of creating a end-to-end test and having it fail for a while and watching where it fails. I'm just looking at how different it really is. But yes, like using file path feels like a good idea anyway. Like, it's almost self-documenting to use file path instead of path.
Is there any concern about how we would get the licenses for the like to do end-to-end testing, for example? Is that something that we have access to?
I think we have access to it. I don't know.
I don't know how
it works
run Windows.
for us.
Okay.
In AWS, we don't have any roadblocks. We can run even Red Hat, which requires a license. So
Gotcha.
I doubt there is any issues with Windows.
One thing that will come up pretty quickly is the Windows requires different flannel settings than the defaults. So it requires different port and different
for all nodes.
ID. So that's also, how do we, is it a feature that only applies to the new cluster, so we don't enable things for existing clusters to not break them, for example, and stuff like that?
We have some way of running, let's say even flannel. If you look at the flannel settings, when you create a cluster, you can create it with flannel-vxlan or flannel-something. So we can create one with flannel-windows.
Yeah, that works.
It doesn't have to work for all the clusters. So
happy.
Okay.
And I presume we don't need to support Windows for for Kubernetes 1.11. So,
no.
So,
as part of narrowing the scope, as part of narrowing the scope, we should say like only from whatever version we introduced it in, and no like transition, like no need to add to existing clusters. Sounds like it'll be another one that would be good.
Yeah, but over the next few releases, this is reasonable for sure.
It will be experimental for some time at least, I guess, until we get things right with it.
Yeah, but we've done that pattern. And for example, like the Google support is experimental, basically. So
yeah.
By the way, regarding this, Peter did some nice work with the mock for OpenStack, and I think at some point he was anxious to do it also for GCE. Not sure if he's still volunteering for that, but
Yeah, I basically wrote the cloud mock for OpenStack, and it's helped catch a handful of bugs so far, and helps us kind of run through all of the cloud up tasks, which we've been unable to do without access to OpenStack. So that's, I think it's been pretty helpful. Whether it's worth the 3,000 lines of code, yeah, I don't know, but it's helped catch a few bugs, so that's good. And if we think it's reasonable, I think it'd be good to expand on that and add. I was thinking GCE and maybe Spotinst, because that's kind of, it's pretty low. There's only a few resources that it needs to support, and it's kind of built on AWS, so should be straightforward. But
Okay, recurring topics, releases. 119 Alpha 3. So I think we're planning on Cyprian proposing one after merging as PR.
And if there are any problems with the docs, just let me know. And it's the new release process. I think it's called new release.md or something.
okay, so I'll give it a try.
118.1. So I suppose we have a bunch of things to put out to a 118.1. So
most of them were added by me. So I think the first one, as it's not decided in 119, we can remove it. I thought that it would be easier to decide on it. So there is still the VXLAN thing. I reworked it to be a setting. So enable, disable for Flannel. If you agree with it, I can merge it. There was a PR that fixed client-side timeouts in 118.6, or I don't know, somewhere in 118. So I upgraded the dependency.
Yeah, the vendoring.
Okay.
Okay.
And with some AWS vendor updates, I think we get support for AWS China without the workarounds on Route 53 that we have in the docs at the moment.
How does that work? Did they add support for Route 53?
They added their endpoints there, so we don't have to do anything, I think.
Oh, so Route 53 is now available in China?
Yeah.
Ah, cool. I just didn't, it used to be it just wasn't available, is my understanding previously.
And it took a while for them to add it in the SDK. So they didn't even document it when they added it. Okay, so this would be the reason for creating a new 118 release. It's nothing extraordinary breaking. We didn't notice anything except one bug with unknown issue that the clusters are unstable. Happened to me also, but I don't know where. I suspect it was CNI something, but we can't do anything about it. So other than that, 118 seems pretty stable.
That's good. The one you took out, the one you deleted, would you mind undoing? And just, I think we should think about that, because as I understand it, that's a regression effectively in 118, because in 118 we also turned off basic auth, right?
Yes, this is why I added it.
It's worth considering. We should think about that.
And I will add a release note to 118.0 saying if you're using ACM service.
Awesome.
In any case, okay. So decision if we do another 118 release in the next few weeks, or if we wait another few weeks to see if anything else appears.
And the question is, do we want to hold 118.1 for the SSL certificate ID issue? I think that's the big question. And I think that can get closed fairly quickly.
Yeah, if it is an internal flag you can pass, that seems like a reasonable thing people might want. And then it's a workaround, like just looking at this PR, then it's a workaround that like users would have to opt into. And I think that's that seems like a reasonable course of action to me.
So we do everything except open up the security group.
Yeah, so it only works if you have
if you actually
VPN.
put a security group in there. Yeah, okay. I think that.
Well, it also needs a VPN, right? Because it's using the internal IPs. So it's using like a 10.IP.
Yeah, but you have to, yeah, the issue is you need a security group to get there.
Oh, you still, okay.
So this is why it was the idea to automatically open it when you have SSL cert ID.
Yes. I've realized another thing we could do is we could create a service. Never mind. I was going to say if we could get to the API server, we could create a service account and use a Kubernetes service account and use the Kubernetes service account token. But there's a chicken and egg scenario there. Problem there.
Also create a second ELB.
A short-lived ELB. Yes, of course.
Maybe create a second cluster and say, hey, use this one, it's better.
Sure, people would love paying for that.
SSH is looking better and better. All right. Yes, we should definitely look. I think it's important to think about. Let's discuss it on the issue. I don't know if any of these are high enough priority. I guess the VXLAN was interesting, but I guess it's
not a high priority. So
I think given that the workaround for the cert issue is just to explicitly enable basic auth, if we document that in the release notes, then we don't need to block 118.1 on this, and we can work towards 118.2.
Okay. I mean, yeah, yeah.
Okay, and 117.2.
Okay.
Much of anything in there?
Yes, there is an OpenStack bug. Kops DNS controller, I think. Sorry, this is why I put the diff because I didn't know if it's in. So kops controller is not being able to add labels or something. To work, you have to build the pod and the new one will work. It's a simple fix and it's only OpenStack. So the decision is I'm only explaining what happens. So I think, John, you have some minor fix there, but I don't think.
Yeah, it's minor.
Yeah, so it's very little in 1.7.2, if that would be, and it's mostly OpenStack.
I mean, we should, if it's I'm not opposed. The string fix, John, that you put in, it looks like John. Yeah, sorry, John. Sorry, there's an etcd restriction. Sorry, Cyprian, the string fix.
User. Oh.
Sorry, yes. Yeah, so there are three PRs, right? There's the OpenStack fix, there's a etcd user, and there's a string conversion. The etcd user is just a little bit more secure. Is that right?
No, it actually, in some cases, a node will fail to be created. It'll fail to join.
Okay.
Because if you enable AWS IAM Authenticator, then you have then some percentage of times your nodes will not join.
All right, because of the order
it's a race condition. Yeah.
Okay, that seems, and then the that seems like that justifies it. And then the string cast versus format, is that?
It's just a thing to work with Go 115 because the images for Bazel are now based on 115 and it's a new requirement in there.
Okay, but it shouldn't be a behavioral change.
No, it's same thing, just they made it more explicit.
Okay, cool. All right. Well, I mean, I think we can do it for the etcd race. Seems like it justifies it because that's a bit of a pain to track down as well, I imagine. And then the OpenStack thing. So I think it justifies the release. But it's nice. It's good to have a release without a ton of like scary stuff in it. That's a good thing.
Can we test the automation on that one again? Is that
no, sadly the automation only goes to on the 119 and later.
Okay.
Okay. So we should merge all this pretty fast so that 118 can be released.
Okay. Well, it's the top of the hour, so.
Wow. Cool.
Meeting always expands to the time allotted, so thank you all.
Thank you for hosting, John.
Thanks all.